I'm going to go ahead and press live and then give it about 3 seconds. Oh. Hello, everyone. I'm Karen Morgan. I'm a volunteer with AARP Maryland, and this is another in our series of social media interviews during Protect Week, June 2023. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day was yesterday. It's always on June 15th. And around that week, we bring together a number of experts and a lot of information that's either virtual or written, website based, to help people fight the scourge of elder abuse. So today we are honored to have with us Commissioner of Financial Regulation, Tony Salazar. The Office of Financial Regulation is part of the Maryland Department of Labor. And Mr. Salazar has served as Maryland's Commissioner of the Office of Financial Regulation for the last 6 years. He's an attorney, and he has over 35 years of experience, and he is definitely committed to the consumer protection mission of his office. He leads an office of almost 100 employees and believes that his office has to constantly strive to ensure that Maryland citizens can conduct their financial regulation transactions safely and securely without worrying about becoming a victim of fraud or illegal business practices. So that's a lot for one person to do. Good thing you have a staff of 100 behind you, right, Commissioner?
Absolutely, Karen. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's great to be here to, engage in this important initiative.
Yes, and we are really honored to have you too. We are so focused on Protect Week this year and trying to empower people to protect themselves. We hear the drumbeat about scams and frauds, but there are things that we can do to protect ourselves. So before we get started, first tell me more about the Office of Financial Regulation and the role that you play in protecting Marylanders from financial abuse.
Okay, thanks a lot, Karen. Sure. Yeah, we do, as you mentioned, have a staff of nearly 100 people here that are composed primarily of examiners and other financial professionals. So we are part of the state of Maryland, and Governor Moore has made it his mission and the state's mission to leave no Marylander behind. We are fully engaged in that effort through our regulation of financial institutions. So simply put, our office makes sure that businesses that provide financial services to Maryland residents are following all the appropriate state and federal laws and consumer protections. So we have a pretty broad mandate. We cover and regulate and supervise banks, credit unions, mortgage companies, consumer lenders of all types. Basically any company that has an interaction with a consumer or a business on the financial aspects. Now, we don't cover securities. That's handled by the Attorney General's office. But other than that, we take steps to fight unlicensed entities or individuals, people that are doing scams. We operate on the civil side, and we try to stop them. And where we can't, and we need to go further, we work closely with the Attorney General's office and with the U.S. Attorney's office here in Maryland to bring criminal actions if we need to. Then, of course, we're plugged in with the federal regulators as well.
Right. So it's a lot to manage for sure. So one of the things that you're tasked with helping us with in terms of being safe has to do with peer-to-peer payment apps. And what we call them are things like Venmo or Cash App or Zelle or PayPal. So can you tell us more about what these apps are and how they work?
Sure. So they are part of what this new financial technology is developing. They're payment systems, and as the name implies, P2P or peer-to-peer is I can send money directly to you. I don't have to use a check. I don't have to do anything else. I can use my phone, press a few buttons, put in the amount of money I want to send, and then all the financial technology companies have worked with the banks and the financial institutions to make the money move from my account to your account. So as you mentioned, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, and Zelle are the types of of services they have. And usually it's done through your phone or your computer.
Okay. And the Cash App or the peer-to-peer space can be so confusing because Zelle, for example, is owned by banks. Cash App is not owned by a bank. It's an independent app. And then there's some apps like PayPal or Cash App or Venmo where you can deposit money directly into the app, but you need a bank in order to use Zelle. So it's hard for the average person to understand how these payment apps can be regulated and how actions can be enforced.
Sure. So that mirrors our banking system and financial system in the country today, right? So we have institutions that are regulated primarily through the states, our state chartered banks and credit unions, for example. And then there's some that are federally regulated. And that's the same thing with the payment apps. So you'll have some that are not really banks, and they don't hold money because they're not a bank. They are just a payment service, right? They're like a money transmitter. You give them the money, they send it somewhere else. And then others are financial institutions that want to compete with some of these newer money service businesses, and they've set up their own networks. But for those, you have to be a customer of theirs, a bank customer. So they are permitted to hold your money. There's pros and cons on all of this, right? So the ones that are banks, they are typically insured by the FDIC. So if you put your money in an account with them and they happen to go belly up, you'll make sure you get your money. On the other hand, the other companies, you might have a bit more of a risk if you have some money in there because they don't have deposit insurance, and your money might be more at risk with them. There's different regulations as well. So some of those would be primarily regulated at the federal level through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're a regulator like us, but they're at the federal level. They're one of our partners at the federal regulation at the federal level. The Federal Trade Commission also deals with fraud and payment scams. So in summary, the important thing to remember about P2P payment apps and other money transmitters is that our office is a primary regulator. So concerns about P2P payment apps can come to us. Consumers can also file with the CFPB for scam-related events or with the FTC. Understanding, of course, that those are national organizations, so they aggregate complaints from everywhere. And I think, if you're at the state level, you might get a little better service. Put in a plug for our office. We're smaller and we can give them a little more attention.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure that one question that those of us who view this interview are going to have is, why do some people get their money back and why do other people not get their money back? What's going on there, and what role does the office play in that?
Sure. So there's two real important things that people need to look at or understand. Number one is what regulations apply. So some regulations, for example, on the credit card regulations, if you use your credit card in some of these apps, you're provided with all the protections that you normally get through your credit card company. And those are set by the company, but also in federal law. And the same thing is like you're using your ATM card or a debit card. To the extent you're dealing with a bank or an institution, you may be able to take care of or get the benefit of those federal regulations. On other instances, let's say Venmo, you're entering into a contract with that institution. So it's really important to read the terms of service. And, I think you'll find in there that sometimes you don't have all the protections because they're not a product that's covered by regulations. So our office, if you file a complaint on that, if we have jurisdiction over the entity, which would mean maybe a money transmitter who has to be licensed through our office, or it's one of the state chartered banks, we're able to go directly to them and work out, understanding the consumer side, talking to the institution, and they're usually willing to work out some kind of solution. If it's an institution that we don't handle, we make it that we don't supervise directly, we make it a practice of going to that regulated entity, telling them about the consumer complaint, trying to get it elevated to somebody who can handle it. but then we make a referral to the proper federal regulator for them to do that, because that's important that the federal regulators know, A, that this complaint has been made so they can track it, right? And then they can work that complaint as well. So reporting is very important.
Yeah, it really is. And because and I guess the other issue that people keep running into is whether the Cash App or the owner of the app will say, well, you let this transaction happen, so it's not fraud. Or maybe you were deceived, so it is fraud. And I think that can be very confusing.
That can be. So sometimes, what you'll hear the institution say is, oh, that was an unauthorized transaction, right? And those are terms of art, to the points that you just made. If somebody comes in and somehow gets access to your account and you had nothing to do with it, so that's an unauthorized transaction, right? You did not say to do it. But some of these scams, they get the consumers to do their bidding, right? They target people and they go in and they try to get them to then take money out of their account for a fraudulent purpose. And then what happens, that's where it starts getting into a much grayer area, because it's an authorized transaction, right? The consumer affirmatively took an action to take money out of their account, even though they were being scammed and they didn't understand that. And sometimes that leads to different, abilities to collect your money. But one thing that really is important, regardless of the type of fraud or scam that's happened, is that once the consumer becomes aware of it, they immediately report it. They immediately report it to the institution they're dealing with. Because while money these days moves very quickly, you can't just assume there's not an ability to turn off the transaction at some level. So you want to be immediate on that, and you want to get to law enforcement or some regulatory agency as quickly as possible as well.
That makes a lot of sense. So what are some best practices? And I know you mentioned reading the terms of service. Those are only 30 pages long. So other than that, with really tiny print. So other than that, what other steps can older adults take to, not become a victim of fraud or targeted by scammers? While, they need to use these apps, or they ought to be able to use these apps. And, one thing that I found just in my own personal life is that there are more like small businesses that are asking for money to be transmitted that way because they don't want to pay the transaction fees that come from using a charge card or even a debit card. So even businesses, even though we're told not to use these apps for businesses, there's sometimes where businesses are asking to be paid that way. And you're like, well, okay. So what are some things that we can all do to not be victimized by these crooks while we're using these apps?
Sure. One of the important things is, you're not going to read all 35 pages, as you said, but knowledge is power, right? So you have to do your research first. You should never send money in response to unsolicited requests, unsolicited, goods or services or things like that. So that's number one. You can always go online and check at nmlsconsumeraccess.org, because a lot of these companies, if they're not banks, they need to be licensed entity. If it's not a licensed entity, at least when you're looking for an app to sign up for, you don't want to use that, right? Right. You can check the ratings of the businesses you're dealing with too. I know I personally always do that. You go to the comments and you check the reviews, and you want to stick with highly rated ones. I have a couple other things that I like to do myself is, number one, when you're setting up an app, you limit the amount of money that you use, or you limit the account that you link it to. So let's say, you want a shopping account. I'm going to set up a special shopping account. I'm going to have it linked to my savings account. And I have $500 in it. So that way you personally limit your account to that. You can also, a lot of companies these days are using payment protection for the purchase of goods and services like PayPal or Venmo. That's another, you should take advantage of that. If it's a big purchase, use your credit card, because while you might pay the fee, you're going to get the benefit of the credit card, typically zero liability protection. So that's that's something to consider. It's a trade-off because you do involve a fee. Now, you should ask the apps and check and see if they have multi-factor authentication, which is a system where where you plug in one method, like you might put in your account number or a passcode, but then they have to text you back or call or whatever you set up. It's a two-way system to verify that in fact you're dealing with the right account. So those are a couple of them. I mean, there are a number of different things. For example, on the scam front, it's always important to take your time and not be rushed into any activity or decision, right? So if you get calls in this day and age, hang up if you don't know who they are or where they come from. If you get a message on your machine, it says unknown caller, don't even answer. Let them leave a message. Uh, Verify when people call. If they call, you can, if you do happen to get a request that you take information from them and then hang up. And if it's legitimate, you can call back and get back to them. So, if they claim to be security or somebody calling, and you happen to get their number, you can ask a bunch of questions and then say, fine, I'll get back to you. And then you control that interaction and you can check the number on the back of your card or go to their website and do that. So I think it's a little proactive. Always be wary of people asking for money that you don't know about. Circumstances that don't feel right, trust your gut. A lot of times it's right. And again, always slow the transaction down regardless of the amount of pressure.
And I'll say that for myself, I've noticed that for example, I'll use Zelle, but I have like a specific account that's just for Zelle that has a limited amount of money. But I've noticed that when I do transactions, there'll be like multiple warnings, or I might have to log in more than once to do the transaction. And I'm wondering if maybe that's at the behest of increased scrutiny by your office and by federal regulators related to fraudulent things that are happening when people use these apps.
Well, that's right. We look to and work with the federal regulators, right? And they are putting increasing scrutiny, as we are, on making sure that the apps don't make it too easy or make it easy for scams to happen, and then the institutions to walk away and say that they don't have liability for that, when in fact they can set up these various hurdles, and they try to balance between being market friendly and being secure. But we when we do our examinations, we look to make sure that they're complying with federal law, that they're providing the appropriate disclosures so people can understand what their rights are, where to call. And I know that the federal regulators are particularly active in, this area and looking at fees. But, Karen, it's a constant battle with the scammers. As they are out there constantly targeting seniors. We're in what's called the senior tsunami. There's a lot more, people retiring every day. And the marks aren't just coming from this country. The internet has enabled people to call and get active here from overseas. So it's something that consumers really need to just be wary when they go out, and maybe do a little research and take some time, because most transactions they go through problem free.
Right. It's hard to remember that when the only news you hear is about the person who just got scammed. But yes, I mean, there what, millions, maybe billions of these transactions that happen in the course of like a week or a month or whatever. And if 99% of them go through, that, that 1% could be a doozy, but 99% of us, they do happen successfully. I guess I'm wondering too, is if you have been victimized, or you figure out after the fact that you've just been victimized, besides reporting it to the Cash App, or I keep saying Cash App, but besides reporting it to the application, are there other things that you can take, because this money gets transferred immediately? So you could call the police. Are there other things that maybe we can do?
Well, I mean, you can reach out again to our office, and I can give you that, that number really quickly. Our telephone number is
Okay.
410-230-6100. We have a toll free number as well. That's 1-888-784-0136. And those numbers are found on our website. So you can always go online there. We have, aside from the telephone numbers, online access. People can send an email, they can call. It really is hard. I think the best option is to contact the party you're dealing with, in terms of the app or the provider, the bank, whatever. Number two, to the extent you're in Maryland, you can try to reach out to our office. The Attorney General's office also has, their Consumer Protection Division as a mediation unit. So that might be a little farther on down the line. Getting your money back immediately. If it's a good sum of money, you ought to contact um, uh, law enforcement. Contact your local law. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I have personally known, situations where people have had their money in a real estate transaction, right? So scammers
Yep.
got involved in the middle of a title company and the payment. They took this young lady's money, and she immediately contacted her local law enforcement, and they were able to stop the transaction at the bank
Wow.
just before the money got transferred overseas. But
Yikes.
that was a fortuitous event. But like I said, it can happen. It's just a matter of timing. And that happened to involve a large amount of money. And the officer who took the call said, "Let me see if I can help." And immediately, got on the phone with the bank, and they worked it through. And her real estate transaction was saved by that.
Yeah, I mean, wire transfers, especially in the real estate, I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars transferring at one point in time. And I remember when I was involved in a house sale just last year, and I was on pins and needles and just like checking again and again and again to make sure that it was the right bank, that it was the right branch of the right bank, that the timing was right, all of that. It was totally a nail biter.
So I can offer a little advice on that, and that is use the telephone if you're involved in transactions like that with wire transactions. You get an instruction, you call your trusted party, if it be your title company or attorney, depending on how it's handled, and you say, "Did you send this instruction?" And you read you ask them,
Mm-hmm.
"Am I supposed to do this? Am I supposed to do that? Am I supposed to do that?" And when they confirm that those are the instructions you're to receive, then you contact your bank, and you confirm that these are the instructions I'm giving you. And you gotta, I mean, because you just don't know. They've become very sophisticated these days. They will lurk in the title company's emails and wait for an opportunity to pounce, and they're hard to find out that they've been cracked, that the email's been cracked.
Yeah, that is such great advice. And when you get that phone number, whatever you do, don't Google it. Don't
Yeah,
Google the phone number. Get the phone number from correspondence that you know came from your bank or from the back of a charge card or a credit card or something
right.
like that that came from a trusted source. But don't Google it, whatever you do. And the two-factor authentication factor that you mentioned is really important. It's not just something you know, which might be your password. It's something you are, which could be your fingerprint or an iris scan, or it's something that you have, which could be some sort of security key or something else in your physical possession that authenticates your identity. So we need to kind of become experts in all these kinds of things just so that we can verify who we are at a time when we need to conduct our financial business.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it's up to each individual consumer to, uh, learn. Knowledge is power. They just you don't sometimes need to use the most shiny new product. Let it play out for a little while before it's used. Stick with trusted sources. You can still pay these days the old-fashioned way, right?
What
Send
might that be?
Yeah, well, for me, it's send a check or use a credit card. But you know, I date myself.
Yeah, okay. I've not heard of these forms. Okay, I will keep that in mind. No, of course I know what you're talking about. I will use a charge card definitely. I guess cash might still be king, maybe. But all of these ways of payment. I mean, cash. I mean, if you have cash in your hand and somebody walks up and snatches it out of your hand, you're out. You're out of cash. You're still, you're still in a troublesome. You're still in trouble even though there wasn't a so-called, text message involved or an email involved or something like that. So, I mean, dealing with cash or finances, we just need to be careful. And I guess the other thing that I want to mention is that those of us who are older can be targets, not necessarily because we're older, but because people who are older tend to have more financial assets in one place. They have a 401k, whereas somebody who's 25 might not have a 401k.
That's right.
So that's
Exactly right.
a tempting target for the crooks.
That's right, and they're out there doing that. And so again, it's up to us to be knowledgeable, to set up structures. Like I think one of the best ways we can do that, I think, is to use separate accounts that are limited in dollar value, and not panic when we get these calls. That A, don't take them. B, not panic, and slow transaction down so that you understand what's happening.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. So as we wrap up, is there any other advice that you would like to give older adults and their loved ones in terms of avoiding frauds and scams with regard to peer-to-peer payments or just with regard to financial transactions?
Sure. One of the things is, open conversation, right? So, I have that, with my family as well, because, my children have grown up with the electronic media all around them. And so a lot of times the younger generation, they're able to grasp what's hot, what's trendy, what to stay away from. And, they can be a very good sounding board for that type of information that might be hard to get online. You don't trust reviews. You can talk to younger folks, but also, if there is a scam, sometimes people are scared to talk about it with third parties. So if you can talk with your family, it's important, because they can help you get through. Sooner or later, everybody makes mistakes, right? And when one of these scams happen, it's not the fault of the elderly or the person who did it. It's they're victimized. And so they need to, feel comfortable. They should feel comfortable in talking with, a regulatory agency and explaining what happened, because that could not only help themselves, but it could help others. But at a minimum, maintain some trusted people that you feel comfortable talking with to get information and get advice or just bounce ideas off of, and that'll make you a stronger and more prepared consumer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And really it's not picking up the phone or looking at a text. That's not the crime. The crime is the criminal who's literally trying to steal money from you. They're just using the telephone or the computer as a vector for that. That's why we really need to talk about it. And there's no shame. We're just getting a comment here saying there's no shame in reporting or talking through your experience with the scammer. We have to talk about it, because when we talk about it, we put the responsibility on the people committing these crimes. And I keep emphasizing crimes, because these are criminals who are doing these crimes.
Absolutely. And if it's not reported, regulatory agencies like us or the criminal authorities or the law enforcement authorities don't know and can't take action. And,
Exactly.
Unfortunately, Karen, as this is an underreported crime, right? So we have statistics on what we know, but we also know that, a lot of people, for whatever reason, don't necessarily report what's happened. It might be small dollar. They might not feel comfortable or ashamed. And so, it happens more often than not, and it needs to make sure it comes out of the shadows so that proper action can be taken, and other people can feel comfortable when they say no or they hang up, right? People might feel bad hanging up, but if they know that other people are doing that, then they'll feel, they'll feel empowered and they'll do that for themselves.
Oh, that's a great point. Well, Commissioner Tony Salazar, thank you so much for taking time out of your immensely busy schedule because you're so busy fighting criminals. I don't know how you made time for us, but we're glad you did. Thank you so much. And this is happening during Protect Week. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day was June 15th, 2023. It's June 15th of every year. And during the week that comprises World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, we make available AARP Maryland, our partner organizations, such as the Office of Commissioner of Financial Regulation and other partner organizations, make available for free lots of resources and virtual events and live events like shred events that people can attend or look into so that they can protect themselves. Look into these events at aarp.org/MD for more information about events that are happening in your area and to look at virtual events that have taken place over the week. We had a teletown hall yesterday, and we will have another social media interview come Monday, bonus interview on check washing. So stay tuned for that. Commissioner Salazar, once again, thank you so much for making your time or freeing up your time to talk with us today. It's been immensely helpful as always.
Karen, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I want to thank AARP for all the work they do, on a day-to-day basis, but particularly during Protect Week. This is a heavy lift, and you all are doing a great job there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.